S.Y. Qureshi on the Supreme Court order, why you think that this is the right thing, why you think transparency will improve as a result of this, and this concern that how can a promise which was made to donors when they bought these electoral bonds from 2017 onwards, that their names will be kept a secret, now be broken by the Supreme Court order which asks the Election Commission to share the names of all those who donated. They've told the SBI to give the names to the Election Commission. Is that okay in law? What are you making of the Supreme Court order? S.Y. Qureshi.
Yeah, I believe that this is a landmark judgment and it is for transparency. And I would like to recall when the scheme was introduced through the budget of 2017, the then finance minister, his opening statement itself is worth remembering and recalling. He said, without transparency of political funding, free and fair elections are not possible. This was music to our ears because that is what we Election Commission have been demanding. His second sentence was equally good. He said, for the last 70 years, we have failed to achieve that transparency. Now, naturally, the third sentence should have brought in the transparency, which is what we expected. Third sentence cancelled the entire thing. And what kind of transparency was brought in? Now there will be electoral bonds. So much so that the transparency which existed then disappeared in one stroke. And what was the transparency then? Any donation of more than 20,000 rupees, just 20,000 rupees, was reported to the Election Commission. And Election Commission certified that they have, the donor has told us, on the basis of that certificate, they will get their income tax exemption, which otherwise they were not eligible to. Now, in one stroke, that transparency of donation was taken away. Now, 20 crores, 200 crores, 2,000 crores, nobody will know. Is that transparency? It is destroying that, taking away the transparency and calling and protecting secrecy. The argument given that the donor wants secrecy. I have a question. The donor has been donating for the previous 70 years. They never demanded secrecy and they were donating to all the political parties. And there was no reprisal by any party against any party. And the parties were winning and losing all the time. And many donors were donating to opposite candidates, all the parties at the same time, so that whosoever wins or loses, it didn't matter to them. Then suddenly, where was the question of secrecy? So all that was fraught with the unfairness, and that has what has been exposed by the Supreme Court. They have talked of transparency. They have talked of citizens' right to know. Something which was first established in 2003. When we know about the criminal antecedents of candidates, the financial background. Why? Because ADR and others had gone to the Supreme Court under the right to information that we should know who our candidates are.
So I want to show our viewers how much money has actually been taken by which party through these electoral bonds. So here's the data that we have in the public domain. This is from 2017 onwards. About 57% of the funds that have been raised have actually been for the BJP. So the big chunk has been for the BJP. That's the biggest bar graph there. Then the Congress, which is about 1,123 crores, the TMC 1,093 crores, the BJD 774 crores. The biggest number, of course, is the BJP, which is 6,566. I want to show this to you as a percentage. So if you look at the percentage, about 57.3% of the total, about 11,450 crores of electoral bonds were for the BJP. About 10% for the Congress, 9.5% for the Trinamool, 6.7% for the Biju Janata Dal, 5% for the DMK, and so on. But about 57% was for one party, which is the BJP. The fact, though, is, Anjali Bhardwaj, that if this had been a period between 2004 to 2014, and if we looked at the same data, it's highly probable that at that time the Congress was getting the biggest chunk of donations. So we don't know whether things have really changed very much, because you've got now a situation where the Supreme Court has said that reveal the names since 2017-18, which if I were a donor, I'd be very uncomfortable with, because a promise was made to me when I gave the money to whichever party I did as an electoral bond. Now suddenly 6 years later, the Supreme Court changes its mind, reverses this decision and just scraps electoral bonds. Do you think that's a fair and right thing to do, Anjali Bhardwaj?
Well, Rahul, what I would like to start by saying is that the Supreme Court has really upheld people's right to know. We know that when political parties, whichever party might be, we might talk about, whether it's a BJP or the Congress or any other party, doesn't matter. But when a big corporate is giving money to a political party, they are doing it for a consideration. There is a problem of a quid pro quo. If somebody is giving money to a political party, then that corporate expects the party, when it comes to power, to work for the interest of that particular company. Now, people, when they go to vote, should know who is funding which political party so that they can exercise their right to vote in an informed manner. Because without having this information, when I cast my vote, I'm doing it in an uninformed manner, and it is violating Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution, which is my right to free speech and expression, from which the right to information flows. So I think we need to remember that that's what the court has upheld. It is true that a very large chunk of the funding through electoral bonds has come to the BJP, as you have shown. And there have been problems which were presented before the court during the course of hearings, that the manner in which the electoral bond scheme was imagined did not leave scope for a level playing field. We have a situation where people do not know who is funding whom through electoral bonds, and the opposition parties have no way of knowing. The Election Commission has no way of knowing.
No, but isn't it better then to reform the scheme and try and make the tweaks to make it more transparent rather than scrap the process completely?
I think the inherent problem with the electoral bond scheme and the 4 laws that were amended. Rahul, it's very important, I think, to bring that up front, that the electoral bond scheme was brought in along with 4 amendments that were made to important laws. The amendments were basically they curbed people's right to information. So when we are looking at the judgment today, the judgment holds not just the electoral bond scheme unconstitutional, it also holds the amendments made to the Companies Act, the IT Act, RP Act, also unconstitutional. So this entire scheme is really just to give anonymity to the donations.
No, but how are we better off now? See, this is the point. Anjali Bhardwaj, how are we better off now? Now that the scheme has been scrapped, how will this election be more transparent? All the payments will be made through the previous means, which is to pay anonymously. It's not as if they're declaring who the donors are. So how are we better off with this judgment?
Yeah, there's a very simple answer to that question, Rahul. Earlier, there was cash through which people could or companies could give donations, and there were banking channels. The electoral bonds, when they were brought, were expected to bring in greater transparency. Instead, they were a regressive step, which introduced greater anonymity. So nothing else changed. People could donate through cash or through banking channels along with electoral bonds, and they will continue to do so even after electoral bonds are scrapped. Today's judgment has just made sure that the regressive amendments that were made to the 4 laws and the very regressive electoral bond scheme has been scrapped. So the difference that is going to come is that we will not have these floodgates of anonymous, unlimited funds through the banking channel going into political parties. This was completely harming people's and voters' right to information. That will stop.